The officer was already leaning into the window when he said it. "Hand me your keys or you're going to jail." It happened fast. A routine traffic stop on a wet two-lane road. Hazard lights flashing. One driver gripping the steering wheel, trying to process what he had just heard. And in moments like that, a lot of people make the same mistake. They either panic and start arguing, or they hand over something important without understanding what is actually happening. But there's a calm, simple phrase that can slow the whole situation down without escalating it. "Officer, I want to cooperate. Am I legally required to give you my keys?" That's it. Not a speech, not a roadside debate, not a challenge, just a respectful question that does two important things at once. First, it shows you're not resisting. Second, it forces the situation to become clear. Is this a request or is it a lawful order? And that distinction can matter more than most drivers realize. If you appreciate practical traffic stories that teach you something you might actually use one day, stay with me, because this is one of those situations where a few calm words can completely change the direction of a stop. Picture the scene. It's a little after 10 at night. A man named Daniel is driving home from a late shift. He's tired, still thinking about work, and he rolls through a right turn just a little too quickly. Not reckless, not dramatic, but enough for the patrol car behind him to light up. He pulls over right away. So far, nothing unusual. He turns off the radio, lowers the window, and keeps both hands where the officer can see them. That part matters more than people think. Before anyone says a word about rights, keys, or tickets, the officer is already evaluating something much simpler. Is this person calm? Is this person unpredictable? Is this person a threat? The officer walks up, introduces himself, and asks for license, registration, and proof of insurance. Daniel provides them. His voice is steady. He doesn't make sudden movements. Again, so far, this is the kind of traffic stop that happens every day in every state. Then the conversation changes. The officer says he noticed Daniel's slow response when pulling over and asks whether he's had anything to drink. Daniel says no. He explains he just got off work and is tired. The officer keeps talking. He asks where Daniel is coming from, whether he takes any medication, whether he'd be willing to step out of the vehicle. Now, right? Here, a lot of drivers start mentally jumping ahead. They assume the officer has already decided they're impaired, or they assume this is all just fishing. But on the roadside, assumptions can get you into trouble, because not every strange question means the same thing, and not every request from an officer carries the same legal weight. Daniel steps out. The officer speaks with him for another minute, watching the way he stands, the way he answers, the way he tracks the conversation. Then comes the line that changes the whole stop. "Hand me your keys, or you're going to jail." That sentence sounds simple. It isn't, because there are at least three very different things that line could mean. It could mean the officer is making a safety decision because he genuinely believes the driver is impaired and is trying to prevent the vehicle from being driven away. It could mean the officer is escalating quickly and wants physical control of the car before continuing the investigation. Or it could mean the officer is using forceful language to pressure compliance without clearly explaining whether the driver is under arrest, detained for a specific reason, or simply being ordered not to drive for the moment. And when a driver doesn't understand which of those worlds they're in, they usually respond the wrong way. Some people instantly resist. They clutch the keys tighter, they raise their voice, they say things like, "You can't do that," or "I know my rights," or "I'm not giving you anything unless you show me the law." That almost never helps. Other people go to the opposite extreme. They surrender the keys, stop asking questions, and later realize they still don't even understand whether the officer was requesting cooperation, ordering a temporary safety measure, or beginning an arrest process. Neither reaction is good. That's why the best move in that moment is often the simplest one. "Officer, I want to cooperate. Am I legally required to give you my keys?" Listen to what that phrase does. It lowers the temperature. You're not refusing. You're not accusing. You're not trying to embarrass the officer or perform for a camera. You're signaling something very important. I'm calm, I'm listening, and I'm trying to understand exactly what you're directing me to do. That matters. A roadside stop is not a courtroom. It is not the place to win a legal argument. It is a place where confusion can become risk very quickly. The safest drivers understand that clarity is often more valuable than bravado. Now, depending on the state, the reason for the stop, and the officer's observations, laws and procedures can vary. Officers may have authority in some situations to prevent someone from continuing to drive, especially where impairment or public safety is involved. In other situations, the issue may be less clear, or the officer may simply be making a request in forceful language. That's exactly why calm clarification matters. And this is the part many viewers miss. The purpose of that phrase is not to trap the officer. It's to protect you from making two different mistakes at once. The first mistake is accidental noncompliance. If the officer is giving a lawful order and you respond with defiance, the stop can escalate fast, even if your original traffic violation was minor. The second mistake is uninformed compliance. If you hand over the keys without understanding what is happening, you may unintentionally make later decisions from a place of confusion and fear instead of clarity. Daniel, standing on the shoulder that night, takes a breath and says the phrase exactly that way. Officer, I want to cooperate. Am I legally required to give you my keys? The officer pauses, and that pause is important, because the moment Daniel asks that question calmly, the interaction stops being emotional and becomes procedural. The officer now has to clarify his position. He can still be firm. He can still take control if the law allows it, but he has to make the nature of the demand more clear. He responds, I'm ordering you not to drive. Give me the keys for now. That answer tells Daniel something useful. This is not casual conversation anymore. This is an officer giving a direct instruction tied to safety. Daniel does not argue. He does not pull back. He does not ask 5 more questions on the shoulder of the road. He hands over the keys, and that's another lesson people don't always want to hear. Sometimes the smartest thing to say is the phrase, and the smartest thing to do right after saying it is comply, because the phrase is not magic. It does not override authority. It does not immunize you from arrest. It does not turn every command into a negotiation. What it does is create a record of calm cooperation and force-needed clarity before you decide your next move that can matter later. If the officer's order was lawful, your respectful response reduced the chance of needless escalation. If the officer's actions were questionable, your respectful response reduced the chance that your own behavior would become the bigger issue. Either way, you win something important. Control over yourself, and in traffic stops, self-control is often the difference between a manageable situation and a terrible one. About halfway through the stop, Daniel learns something else. The officer tells him another driver called in a report about a vehicle drifting in the lane a few miles back. That doesn't prove impairment by itself, but now the stop makes more sense. The officer wasn't reacting only to the turn. He came to the window already concerned about public safety. That's why context matters. Drivers often experience a stop from the inside. They know what they did, what they didn't do, what they drank, what they didn't drink, how tired they are, where they came from. But the officer is looking at the situation from the outside. Maybe he saw something you don't consider important. Maybe dispatch gave him information you haven't heard yet. Maybe he is wrong, maybe he isn't. The point is, you usually don't know the full picture. In the first minute, that's why calm language works so well. It buys understanding without adding friction. And if you've ever wondered how ordinary drivers accidentally make a bad stop worse, this is usually how it starts, not with some dramatic crime, not with some outrageous confrontation, just with a moment of confusion and ego. A driver hears a forceful command, feels disrespected, and decides the next sentence out of their mouth needs to prove something. It doesn't. The roadside is not the place to prove you're right. The roadside is where you make sure everyone gets home safely and the facts stay clear. A little later, the officer asks Daniel to perform field sobriety tests. Daniel understands now that this is not just about a turn signal or a rolling stop. The stop has shifted into an impairment investigation. He stays calm, he listens carefully, he does not volunteer extra explanations that nobody asked for. He also does not become combative because the officer took the keys. That part matters too. Many drivers make the mistake of treating every traffic stop as one giant legal event where every sentence must be answered with a speech. In reality, traffic stops are a series of smaller moments, and each one carries its own risk. How you answer a question is one moment, whether you understand a command is another, whether you escalate physically or verbally is another. Good decisions come one step at a time. If you've ever been in a situation where an officer's tone made everything feel more serious than it was, you already understand this. Tone can create panic can create bad decisions, and bad decisions can linger long after the original ticket or investigation is over. That's why I want to slow down and repeat the core lesson in plain English. If an officer says, "Hand me your keys or go to jail," do not snatch the keys away, do not launch into a lecture, do not say, "You have no right," do not reach suddenly. And do not assume that silence will protect you. Instead, say this calmly: "Officer, I want to cooperate. Am I legally required to give you my keys?" If the answer is yes and the officer is giving a direct order, the safest move is usually to comply and save any challenge for later through the proper process. If the answer sounds vague, emotional, or inconsistent, your question has still done something valuable. It has clarified the record, reduced ambiguity, and shown that you were not escalating. And one more thing. The exact words matter less than the tone behind them. You can use a shorter version if that feels more natural. Officer, are you ordering me to hand over my keys? That also works, but the best version includes the phrase I want to cooperate because cooperation is the emotional signal that keeps the interaction grounded. It tells the officer you are not gearing up for a fight. You are trying to understand the instruction before responding. That is a powerful difference. If this has ever happened to you, or if you've seen a traffic stop where something small suddenly turned tense, think about how you would have responded. Most people imagine they'd stay calm, far fewer actually do, and that's why it helps to have a phrase ready before you ever need it. The stop with Daniel eventually resolves in a way many viewers might not expect. The officer, after continuing the investigation, determines Daniel is not intoxicated. He believes fatigue was a factor and tells him he's concerned about his ability to drive safely in that moment. He issues a warning for the traffic violation and tells Daniel to call someone or wait before driving again. That ending may sound anticlimactic, but that's exactly why it matters. Real traffic stories are often not dramatic. They're messy, uncertain, and shaped by judgment calls. An officer may suspect one thing and later conclude another. A driver may feel targeted and later realize there was more context than they knew. A command that sounded outrageous at first may turn out to be tied to a genuine safety concern, or sometimes a command may still deserve legal scrutiny later, but none of those possibilities are improved. By roadside escalation, Daniel's best decision that night was not some brilliant legal argument. It was staying calm long enough to ask the right question, and that question gave him the one thing panic never does: clarity. Before we wrap up, let's bring the lesson home. If an officer demands your keys, the issue is usually no longer just the original traffic stop. It may involve safety, impairment concerns, or a belief that you should not keep driving. Laws and procedures can differ depending on the state and the exact circumstances, so there is no universal magic sentence that solves every stop. But there is a smart, responsible approach. Stay still, keep your hands visible, don't argue through emotion. Clarify whether the officer is making a request or giving a lawful order, and use the phrase that keeps the interaction respectful and clear. Officer, I want to cooperate. Am I legally required to give you my keys? That sentence won't guarantee the outcome you want. Nothing can do that, but it can help you avoid making the situation worse, and sometimes that is the most important win available in the moment. If you value calm, practical stories that help make sense of real traffic situations without the fear, the drama, or the fake legal myths, this is exactly the kind of channel to subscribe to. The goal here is simple: better informed drivers, safer decisions, and fewer people learning hard lessons on the side of the road, because the most important part of a stop is not sounding clever. It's knowing how to stay composed when the pressure suddenly rises. And the next time you hear a forceful command that doesn't make immediate sense, ask yourself one quiet question before you answer out of fear or pride. Do I understand whether this is a request or an order? That difference can shape everything that happens next.